thank you for joining. To our audience, Robert Gilby is a distinguished leader in the world of media, technology, and marketing transformation. And he's no stranger to India. He has been here since a long time. He just told her he just told us he came first to India in '97. Um, he has led APAC strategies at global giants like Disney, Nielsen, Dentsu, and currently he's a senior advisor at Ado AI and Moonji. Thank you so much, Mr. Gilby, for giving us your time. Given your leadership, across such big brands, you have spent close to 2 decades. You have almost seen the rise of internet, uh, right? You must have also seen the rise of AI, the rise of tech in marketing, tech in comms. Uh, where have you seen the most important moments come in, and uh, where do you think uh, you know this technology revolution is taking us?
Well, I think, one of the common themes I've seen across all the companies I've worked at is that there are always going to be industry shifts, and technology has been in driving that. We've seen it through waves of digitization of television, through the adoption of internet, e-commerce, and digital streaming like GeoStar. We've seen these constant evolutions, but clearly AI is one of the most significant, most far-reaching, and most impactful kind of changes in technology that we've had. And I think in many ways I think about AI as taking all of that data that we've been generating as we've adopted digital across all of the industry sectors and all parts of what we do, and then applying these amazing models to help us make better decisions. So I have a very clear philosophy when it comes to AI, because there's a lot of hype and a lot of excitement, which is understandable, but there's also a lot of concerns and risks and challenges to think about. And my philosophy is quite a simple one. I'm a big believer that responsible AI can augment and amplify human intelligence.
Hmm.
It's not about the replacement. It's about the augmenting and amplifying our human intelligence. And just a very short point on that, human intelligence to me includes things like our creativity, our strategic insight, intuition, our emotional connections with other humans. And so, when I think about the journey I've had through Turner and Disney and Nielsen and Dentsu, transformation was always human first. Always human first. And those shifts were all about aligning people behind that kind of purpose, building resilient teams, and navigating this complexity, because it's ultimately people that are going to have to navigate these changes. And so whether it's the, I don't know, creative innovation at Disney or Dentsu strategic reset, it's all about aligning people behind the belief first before you actually get to the plan. So when I think about AI, there's a lot of work that still needs to be done on the mindset of how to embrace this and our responsibility with it. And then there's a lot of execution still to happen.
Yeah, but don't you think that, with all the technological advancements that we have had, AI is the one which might, which has made human intervention almost obsolete, or may have the largest impact on making human intervention almost obsolete?
Well, I think you're talking about one of the risks of AI. So remember, I mentioned this responsible AI should augment and amplify, not replace. Responsible AI to me includes addressing a number of things. One of them is addressing bias. Bias comes a lot in the way you train an algorithm.
Yeah.
And so, and there's no market where this is more important than India, because of the rich diversity of India, the diversity of language, diversity of culture, the nuances. When we look at AI models for India, they need to be trained with data in India that respects and understands local culture, customs, practices, and certainly the language and vernacular sort of adoption. And so removing bias requires us really kind of looking at that process. And so responsible AI is not just replacing, it's about saying, how do we make this process reflect and be better? By the way, the humans behind the data as well matter. So we need that human in the loop piece. It's not just remove a human. It's very much about augment by having that human in the loop reviews. There are still parts of the process that the AI models don't replace as effectively. So there are these challenges. There's also the hallucinations. That's getting better, I think, in a lot of cases. The better the training data, the better the hallucination. But then there's also us as a society. You think about our communities and our cultures. we may want to remove the difficult parts of jobs, the difficult parts of tasks, but do we
Hmm.
leave people with no ability to earn an income, no time and capacity? I'm not sure it's just as exciting just to replace everyone. It's more exciting to think about here's a human with great potential. How do we remove the burden part of their job and their life? And how do we create more room, more time to augment creativity, idea, innovation? How can they do more with their time that they have? So I'm a big believer that if we do it responsibly, it actually augments what we do. We're not trying to eliminate human intelligence.
Hmm. And you have also, apart from responsible AI, you have also been a strong advocate of practical AI.
Yeah.
What does practical AI look like within the MarTech stack? Um, you know, and is there a gap between AI enthusiasm and effective implementation?
Well, I think there's nothing wrong with enthusiasm. AI is exciting. It is exciting, and it's very easy to get lost in the hype. But for us to really realize the potential to deliver that meaningful impact, we have to focus on solving real business problems
Hmm.
that enhance our human decision making. So that's the kind of key goal. To me, it's about embedding AI into business outcomes. So let's give an example in the marketing, in the MarTech sort of world. Audience targeting, predictive segmentation of your audiences,
Hmm.
creative optimization. Um, you know, all the companies that I'm advising bring this in specific areas. I'll give you an example. Moonji augments the creative process with generative AI video production and other technologies such as virtual production. And they use that to bring bolder ideas to life faster or more cost effectively. So your creative opportunity is enhanced, not restricted by as much time and budget issues. Another company that I think you saw them advising is called Scream, Sqreem.
Yes.
And Scream curates audiences for a brand based on behavioral intelligence. And that behavioral intelligence is sourced from all the buying decisions that happen across sell-side platforms that they work with globally. And then their model is a cognitive AI model. The model actually is designed to take that data, complex data, and rapidly use it to predict an audience behavior. And that's kind of enhancing our process of, oh, well, I want to know, I have a brand that I want to launch. I want to know who's using that brand, where are they, what do they do? So it helps your process. And even Addo, that you mentioned in with my announcement, Addo has been a AI transformation consulting company for almost 10 years now. And their kind of space in the consulting is to help organizations look at your data. Because, let's take organizations like Tata and Reliance have incredible first-party data. It's not the public data of our large language models. It's first-party owned data. And much of the data gathered in large organizations was not organized for AI models originally. So you need to look at that data and say, how do I organize my data to help the models, to help me make better decisions? And then once you've got that, you say, which part of the business problem do I want to solve with AI? Not all problems are equally solvable by AI today. Some are immediately benefit and some will take a little bit longer, like the human relationship pieces. When I look at the advertising agency businesses, there's still a human interaction with your clients. They don't want to immediately go to your AI agent. Maybe in the future, but for now, I think people are still saying, okay, that part I'd like to do, but how do you do your analysis? How do you do your prediction? That part is really complemented. So that's what I meant by practical AI. Bottom line, if it doesn't improve your return on investment, your relevance or speed, it's not practical.
Doesn't make sense.
Hmm.
True. You also talked about bias.
Yeah.
And India is a very diverse country.
Hmm.
Uh, uh, so in bias and algorithmic fairness, are very critical and yet overlooked aspects, right?
Hmm.
From a technical standpoint, uh, you know, w- how should we train AI models so that they kind of inculcate that bias? We all know what happened with XAI,
Hmm.
Grok, very recently when it had to be shut down.
Yes.
Um, uh, how do you train? Because ultimately, all these models are getting trained on the vast amounts of data which are coming in, right, at
Hmm.
all points in time. So, what are the checks and balances, right training models we should use? Because ultimately, practical AI can only be used if the data models, if the training has been done right. What do you think of these aspects?
Well, firstly, algorithm bias isn't a technology problem. It's a human design and representation problem.
Hmm.
Algorithms, as I mentioned earlier, are only as inclusive as the teams and the data behind them. So, while bias is a significant risk in deploying AI responsibly, there are steps that can significantly reduce and mitigate these risks as you build out your models. And most of it is in what you mentioned, the training data. So let's say take India specifically. The training data used to train a model in India has to take into account linguistic diversity, economic stratification, regional cultural differences, which we know are so important. India has the most diverse, country and market of any, and that's its strength. That's an advantage for India. But any model has to be trained with data that reflects all of the country, not just parts of the country. And so that training data is really, really important. It needs to be appropriate data. And there are many companies that have, the reach most of the country and have that data. The other part is this, you mentioned it, humans in the loop. So quality assurance with humans in the loop. And there are various stages you can do that. You can do that when you are reviewing the representation of your training data. You don't have to review every single piece, but you can look at it representatively and have humans do cultural checks, community-based checks, relevance checks. But then before you roll models out in a widespread deployment, do output checks. So get the humans to do the output checks. This is not putting a human into every step in the process, but it's at critical assurance levels so that you can have an output that does reflect the representation of your full community and doesn't just carry forward historical bias of data.
Hmm. Uh, Asia Pacific has been your strategic focus for decades.
Yeah.
Uh, um, uh, you know, Technically and strategically, what's different from deploying, AI and MarTech solutions in the APAC region compared to Western markets?
Well, I think we hit on one of the points about the bias. We need to understand the context. The success of AI is often very cultural context as well. So, I mean, there are various aspects to think about. One is the infrastructure and infrastructure readiness, data readiness. You know, good AI models are trained on consumer behavior or user behavior. And the user behavior in Jakarta or Yogyakarta is going to be different from the behavior in Mumbai, which is different from Bangkok. And so ensuring that you train your models with the appropriate data. Also, there's some interesting dynamics between the AI models that are being built. There's some amazing models being built in India, some amazing models being built in China as well. And so not all markets are adopting just the same global large language models. And I probably make a slight differentiation here in the sense that when we talk about adoption of AI, we often talk about the large language models, whether it's ChatGPT or Perplexity, Claude, etc. Those are just large language models trained on public data. There's a lot of other AI models being built within organizations. And within the MarTech stack, you've got global organizations like Salesforce and Adobe that have implemented, AI into their tech stack. But also you've got large organizations themselves looking at their data and deploying the various types of AI models to either be predictive or to do machine learning. This is not a new area, but it's clearly got a lot more attention from boards, a lot more attention from the C-suite, a lot more attention from everyone along the way. I would just probably point out that another thing that differentiates different markets in the region is that the current wave of AI, organizations are prepared in different levels. Some are AI native, and so they've grown aggressively, and it's been built into their infrastructure, just like the tech native sort of platforms were built that way. Others are transforming in this process, and often the first wave of transformation is usually about cost cutting and productivity gains. And I can reduce my workforce by this many and replace them with AI. There are certainly productivity gains from some deployments, but it's not been proven to be as widely effective as everybody thinks, because there are lots of steps in a workflow that are connected. It's not just replace one task. You're actually connecting people and humans. Where I think the biggest opportunities now in some of the markets, we're seeing is that People are using AI to gain a competitive advantage, to accelerate deployment, to realize ideas that were previously not possible, and to move faster in that space. But I do think you are sitting in possibly the most dynamic market in the region for AI. I do think, India is the one market in the region where I think we're going to see some of the most incredible steps. And that's really because India has the scale, the talent, and the entrepreneurial culture to leapfrog in AI adoption. I mean, you know, I I'm very fortunate, as you said at the beginning. I spent a long time, with my Indian colleagues, and the talent pool, the growth in and breadth of the talent capability in India, from engineering, data scientists, entrepreneurs, marketers. You have the most dynamic marketing force, almost globally, I'd say, because you have to solve complex problems when you're marketing in India. Multiple
Mm,
languages, multiple economic segments, diverse cultural scenario, multiple media platforms. And so your marketers are incredible. I've got some incredible colleagues at Tata and at Hindustan Lever, just incredible marketers. And that's why you often see a lot of Indian talent, Indian marketers moving into regional and global roles because they've had to navigate such a complex market. So you've got the talent, you've got the capabilities, you've got the scale. If you can make your AI, models and systems work in India's complexity, you can pretty much work anywhere.
true. When we were interviewing Luke Julia, he started with saying that generative AI is dead, and we were we were shocked. And then he started towing the line which you are saying, which is segmented AI. So, large language models are, of course, there are everywhere, but I think today where AI models are dominating is those smaller built-in stack models, which are actually solving segmented problems.
Mm.
So I think that is a very relevant point and often overlooked, when having these AI conversations. Anupama is our colleague. She works for martechai.com. She's the one who did that story regarding your Ado AI. Anupama wanted to ask a question. Please go ahead, Anupama.
Hey, I just wanted to ask in terms of how, like, can you give some example, like any real or hypothetical, where generative AI has become a measurable ROI for your client, or what industry has been getting the most impact from AI transformation? Like, is it fintech? Is it sports? What is it like, according to you?
Uh, So I think that I haven't come across an industry that's not deploying in some shape or form AI at the moment.
Yeah.
I think we've moved beyond the what AI to how to deploy and where's the most effective.
Mhm.
I rather than a specific industry, because all industries are looking. So from healthcare was an earlier adopter to move into analyzing kind of trends in terms of not only research for medical treatments, but also how to deploy them effectively. Certainly, financial services has, and fintech as the more native adopter. But we're seeing it across the board. Now, I think a few areas that I think have been interesting. Advertising has been very aggressively adopting this. So you've seen it in all of the big holdcos, but advertising is not just the agencies, it's also the brands. So, for example, one of the guys that we work with in the industry here who heads L'Oreal, great L'Oreal's advertising in the region, talking a lot about the customer journey with AI. And so a lot of the shopping journey is now informed by, tested by, and your options are informed by. And so that whole process from the buying journey is really, really important. If you're a brand, you don't just buy, marketing with a broad reach. You're actually looking for a lot of other ways to be able to measure the effectiveness, of your audience. So I think you've seen this in FMCG brands, you've seen this in fashion brands, you've seen this in advertising agencies. So a lot of the growth of the agencies, holdcos, have been driven by the data sources that they have. You've seen WPP's sort of new open intelligence model, and that's very similar to the approach we're adopting at Scream, where we have multiple sources of the data, and you apply, an AI model to look at the analysis and say, what implication can you draw? How can you plan effectively? You've seen it in the digital media platforms too, whether it's Meta or the YouTube. There's a lot of the optimization of content creation. One piece, I'm always torn between my passion for the technology and my passion for the human creativity. These two appear sometimes to be in conflict, but they shouldn't really be. There is a lot of what you call dynamic content optimization. So we have all these digital platforms, and we need content that's tailored by language, by context. And, we can't always just go straight back to the studio and create from scratch. So there are a lot of models that use AI to be able to assess engagement and dynamically change the content to optimize it for those platforms. But you can also do it, as we do at Moonji, you use it to enhance the creative process. So, for example, if you were a brand and wanted to show your brand in a context of 40 different countries, you may not have the budget to fly to shoot in 40 different countries. But you can create the initial imagery, in a generative AI model. You can supplement it with the VFX, put it onto an LED screen in a virtual production studio, and suddenly you've got the 40 studios producing this high concept, and you can do it in a lot shorter time. And that's what we do. That's an example of what we do at Moonji. So I think you see it in the creative industries, you see it in the brands. We see it in the advertising placement piece. There's still a lot of work going into how do you measure the effectiveness. I think there is a measurement piece to this conversation as well, which we can talk about if you're interested. But there's certainly being deployed across all the pieces.
Hmm. When I talk to AI founders, people who are leading, AI across their companies, a lot of them talk about a certain problem, which is integrating LLMs into their current MarTech stacks without disrupting the existing data pipelines or without disrupting the existing CDP. So, what architectural principles or middleware solutions do you think, or you recommend for that smooth integration?
Well, I think, look, the large language models are very powerful because they've scraped a very large volume of data, and they do provide some very valuable additions to what you do. But again, there's still remaining questions about how many of those models have been trained and what data they've been trained with. And so there's a need in any organization to have a good data governance strategy. So look, I love the technology, and I believe it should be deployed and deployed responsibly. There are a lot of, the strongest AI advocates are full steam ahead. Let's just deploy this. But I do think larger organizations have a responsibility to think about not just the ethics, but the governance of their AI. And so all the large organizations I know go through a process saying, what will be our governance? So what is the source of the data? How do we integrate it? It's not just a technology problem. That is a data governance, usage, and output problem to integrate. Yes, then you need to look at your data architecture. So what is the data source? And look, there are organizations, let's take, Microsoft's a good example, where Microsoft has built its AI around enterprise, and Microsoft is amazing enterprise clients. Salesforce, another big enterprise clients. So these enterprise clients are built in data security, data safety, methods to include that human in the loop, bias, programs and additions. So there are plenty of approaches on how that can integrate with your enterprise structure. The popular large language models are great, but only now are they starting to figure out how do you integrate that. I recommend having data governance processes in organizations, data governance panels where they review the adoption and the usage adoption, having policy guidelines. These are not the exciting parts of AI adoption, but they are part of us responsibly moving to widespread deployment. So yeah, I think there's a tech design piece. Which data do you integrate? There's also a model appropriateness conversation. So large language models are great, but they don't serve every AI problem equally. They're particularly strong at machine learning, but there are other models that are maybe better at predictive. And so choosing the right AI model, linguistic model, or a cognitive model, or there are various different AI models that you can deploy on your data to serve your business problem. So I think I wouldn't start with, we've got this amazing LLM, let's just integrate it into our business. Instead, ask, what business problem are you solving? What data is part of that business problem, and which model best serves it? If it is the LLM, great, then deal with the data governance. If it's another model, work with partners like Addo and like the many others to design. The great advantage for India in particular is you have incredible data scientists and data engineers. It's not that you can't build a model. You can build a model very quickly and rapidly, you know. So I think start with what is the business problem you're solving, not this is an amazing LLM model, how do I integrate it?
As a marketer who is watching this interview, what do you recommend? Because marketing as a field, initially was very psychology driven, right? You would want to understand consumer psychology, etc., etc. But that has become mostly obsolete with so much data coming in now. You are trying to understand your consumer via the data which is coming in. The role of the CTO, the role of the CIO has emerged, to train new language models, new models on the data which is coming in. A marketer today has to seamlessly talk to the CTO, to the CIO, to everybody, to understand the consumer. Um, and in fact, a lot of marketing jobs are, going obsolete because of this. So, as a marketer, how do you upskill? How do you stay relevant? As more and more decisions become autonomous, data driven.
Yeah, I think you have to try not to lose sight of what you're really trying to do. You're really trying to engage a customer, and the marketing funnel does evolve, but the point is you're trying to drive awareness, drive that consideration, and drive a transaction. Ultimately, as a marketer, you have a responsibility to keep that at the center of things. A good and so you think about which parts of that process does the AI enhance and augment. How does it make you faster? How does it make you more effective? How do you reduce waste? There's always been a lot of waste in the marketing process because we don't know that old quote, which is 50% of advertising works, but we're not sure which 50%. That's not really true. When you work at agencies, you are measuring this all the time. But the point is, how do we get better and better, more accurate, more focused, especially as audiences fragment into small micro tribes in different groups on different platforms? I think as a marketer, it's really important to say, okay, what is my business objective? Not just what is my marketing objective, what is my business objective? And how do I deliver that with my marketing strategy? So there's a branding piece to that. You still need reach to some degree in the branding piece. But then with performance marketing and the programmatic buying, your ability to reach with effective metrics has improved. I would say this, and this a little bit comes from my time at Nielsen and then my time at Dentsu, and talking to a lot of organizations trying to push the future of measurement. Measurement for marketers and measuring the success. Measurement's evolving, from a era of reach to resonance. And it has to reflect our modern media platforms. And a lot of this is about capturing human attention and emotional engagement. So we're moving from counting eyeballs to measuring heartbeats, if you like. That requires an understanding what really makes people care. Nielsen, showed that there's a power of, currency grade data, but now we need real time, we need cross-platform, we need attention-aware metrics, and if we deploy AI to help our process of measuring that success, we can enable better predictive analytics. We can look at content affinity model, we model which content will have that best effect. We can even look at sentiment tagging. We look at the neuroscience of why people engage, why they buy. That's what we do with the Scream, the organization I advise. It's a cognitive AI model, and it analyzes 5 billion data signals from all those media sell-side platforms. And so it pulls that, and that allows, when we talk with brands, to look at a rapid yet deep analysis and intelligence on customers for brands. So if you're a marketer, you still have a business outcome, but how do these tools make you faster, better, and more effective at the outcome?
I wanted to deep dive, a bit, and I don't know if the audience would like it or not, if they would want to read it or not. But how do you view the role of vector databases, like Pinecone, VV8, in enabling semantic search, personalization, and memory layers, for AI marketing agents?
There are a number of modeling options you have, and I think, look, semantics are really important. And we can get down to lots of different layers. When you look at the taxonomy of how people engage, why they engage. In some ways, marketers are moving from those broad-reaching, and dynamics into attention measurement. So there's a lot of attention measurement. You've got Lumen and amplified intelligence looking at tracking attention, and so we've moved towards intention metrics. But then when you move up to the neuroscience piece, where you actually look at the subconscious decisioning that happens before your conscious decisioning, then that's where some of the semantics and the organization of the data will allow for faster, more rapid. So I think it's less about, I mean, the tech solutions are very exciting because what's possible now are, rapid analysis, through large data sets at a much faster and more effective time. We, from a marketer's point of view, from a customer's point of view, the tech shouldn't drive necessarily the business outcome. We should say, what would I ideally like to do if there were no constraints? And then we come back to the tech and say, which part of this? Is it the vector models? Is it, is it the semantic structuring? Do I know how to use that? Have I changed my decision-making processes? The small analogy to this is there are some amazing MarTech systems out there, amazing systems. And convincing an organization that they could be more powerful if they implement these MarTech systems is only part of the puzzle. Teaching people how to use the tool is part of the puzzle. But if you don't change your decisioning process, it's like putting a Ferrari in a go-kart and expecting me to suddenly, compete on an F1 track. It's not the same. We need to look at how are we making decisions and how would we make them differently if I could have more insight, more information, not just the same, same process. And then that part is, let's look at the tech solutions when we know exactly what problem we're now trying to solve.
I think the conversation again comes to the skills that need to be developed, the right tools to get all that data funnelized into what makes sense for you and what doesn't. Um, um, my one of my last questions would be, considering we are moving into an age of hyper personalization. Uh, you know, as you rightly said, we are we are going to this subconscious decision of subconscious making of a human decision. There are models which can now look at sentiment analysis, which can look at emotional analysis. Agentic AI will come soon, which will actually map your entire day to your decision making. Whether you have a fight with your wife or not would impact a decision, and agentic AI will implement. Where do we draw the line? What laws do we need? Of course, there's DPDP. Of course, there's a lot of global. There are laws in EU, but where do we, what sort of laws would we need when we are moving into a AI-driven world?
Well, firstly, I'm not a legislator or a regulator, although I did sit on the regulatory board, but that's not my specialism. So I'm not going to profess to be an expert, but I'll go back to that initial principle of responsible AI. And we exist within societies and we care about our societies. If we're good humans, we care about our societies. So when we think about deploying responsible AI, there's so many opportunities it can generate for our society, but only if we think about how it generates opportunities for all society. So we have to think about the impact of, how to deploy it safely and how to deploy it in a way that is responsible for creating opportunities for our society. The last thing we want is a few extremely wealthy individuals and then everybody else struggling. This is not the goal of successful deployment of AI. We talk about great opportunities that, people with their time will be able to focus on more creative and fun activities, but they still need the economic means to do that. So I think when it comes to regulation, and then we see work in Europe on regulation for AI, we see some other societies regulating. I do think it's worth balancing how to enable the opportunities for AI, how to not just slow without consideration, to really consider what needs to be protected, who needs to be protected, how can we enable the growth for the whole economy, the whole society, and then how can we provide for that opportunity of AI to really be beneficial. And so that it's quite a detailed area, and we see a lot of governments and organizations running to catch up. One of the challenges is, a lot of the key decision makers, in governments and on boards and on the C-suite are having to go through a rapid learning on not just what is AI, but what are the implications of AI? And then how do we navigate that? So I've always said, I don't know whether they can regulate this, whether it should be regulated or whether it should be guided at a government and a regulatory level. But my approach for organizations is it's not just about cost cutting, reducing headcount, replacing humans. It's about how can we grow our business, but in a more productive way. So maybe you don't add as many new, but you look at ways of being more productive. So that way, the people that are in the workforce, we, instead of saying you're no longer relevant, we say, how do we train you? How do we move you? How can you benefit from these opportunities? And most industrial shifts and technology shifts through history, we've found a way to do that. I just think this is happening really, really fast. And it would be great if we can think how to support skills development in organization, in society, how to support the digital divide and ensure that we're lifting parts of society and enabling it to help people. And that means then we'll get the balance right between the entrepreneurialism, which we all love, and the economic growth we love. But how do we lift everybody with it? And that's going to take some time. Things are happening immediately, but it's going to take a little bit longer. And to your point about, agentic AI, which is probably the most exciting current trend, there's still a lot of pieces for that. It's being deployed already, so it has been deployed and going to continue to expand. But for that to be as pervasive everywhere still requires a lot more work to connect the pieces in the systems. So in certain subsystems within companies, for certain buying decisions, certain processes, they're much easier to implement agentic AI immediately. But over time, we're going to see more of this. And the orchestration of the agents is going to become, a key piece of how do we orchestrate this to be valuable. And I think we're moving past the hype curve now, and we're into the, okay, how do we make this more effective deployment? So a lot of organizations have said it didn't work as quickly as we thought, but what else can we do now? And that's I think the biggest growth opportunity to say, how do we now really realize the benefits that we said? We're beyond the must do something FOMO, and now we're into the, okay, this could really make things work. How does it work?
Very interesting insights that we got today from you.
Right.
I think it was a learning for both of us.
Yes.
In fact, the field is so dynamic that we are learning every day, almost every day, as to what new is coming. So my final question to you would be, Robert, what new is coming? What is coming next for AI? Where are we heading? Um, what is the most exciting sub layer to the whole AI ecosystem, to the whole AI conversation that we are moving into?
Well, firstly, you're right. I mean, it's great that you're learning. I'm still learning too, and I think anyone who says they're not learning,
Yeah.
even AI experts, I the founder of Addo that I work with, Dr. Aisha Khanna, she's got an undergrad from Harvard, a master's from Columbia, a PhD from London School of Economics in machine learning. She is incredibly intelligent and talented, and even Aisha's always learning too. So I think we're all learning about this implication, and I think that just on that piece. I've found for myself that I've had to make sure I'm comfortable being uncomfortable. That's a headline that I keep reminding myself. It's okay to be uncomfortable. I may have worked for 30 years, but I just need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And so don't worry, you're not alone in that journey. As to what's next, well, there's so many things going on. I can't open my LinkedIn feed or any of my emails and newsletters that I get. It's just a constant stream. But I think one of the areas that interests me most, particularly the sectors I love about sports, entertainment, gaming, marketing, they're very much about people. So it's how the technology sort of helps the people. The bit that I'm excited, and there are people looking at this, is predictive cultural intelligence. AI that helps shape sort of human understanding of emerging cultural trends. How would a marketer, for example, anticipate and design for a cultural shift, before it happens? How can you anticipate that? By looking at the signals. You're finding signals in the noise, and so you're finding those patterns. To do that, you have to combine social listening, because there's a lot of conversation on social, but don't forget that social platforms themselves are inherently biased. Because if you look at the kind of engagement on the social platform, it's not truly representative of how we communicate as humans. what people write on a social feed is not exactly the way we talk to each other. So social listening is one piece of this. Behavioral analysis, so looking at what people actually did, and then looking at the neuroscience of what they, how subconsciously they did that, and then cultural pattern recognition. There's various pieces. So it requires a lot of connecting a lot of different data sets, and it requires a lot of analysis and sense checking and the human in the loop sort of process. But there are people looking at this, because if we could predict those kind of cultural, human contextual pieces, and that would be really useful, because it helps us, again, as I said, amplify human intelligence. We still today, and thankfully still need this, we still need humans to help interpret the cultural meaning and those authentic responses. It doesn't mean we can't create content with AI, or it doesn't mean we can't have an AI character to talk to, or even develop AI friendships with the digital twins, which is always a bit worrying, but that ultimate sort of cultural connection piece that makes us human, that piece, if we can get better at predicting it, then we can maybe enhance it and not lose it along the way.
I was thinking that, I would end the interview after this question, but, cultural predictive analysis has brought another question to my mind.
Okay.
And that is, whether we are ready for, these models to even come in. So I'll take the example of Grok. With all the comments that it started making on Twitter posts, etc., is essentially what it has been trained on. It has been mapping consumer interactions across global internet landscape, and those were the comments which were actually trained by those, the larger information collection. And suddenly Twitter went into frenzy, people went into frenzy, and it had to be shut down. So, uh, the irony of the fact is that the comments that it made were actually the larger conscious understanding of, status quo and how we see things. And suddenly, when it started making comments, our conscious changed from, we started considering ethical guidelines, ethical. So, are we still not ready to truly embrace the Gen AI movement, or the LLM movement, which is actually peeping into our mind and knowing what we know and using it out there? Are we still not ready for it?
Well, I think the Grok example that you mentioned probably is more a reflection of algorithmic bias. If you think about the training data used for that comes with a bit of bias in it as well. And so, what we talked earlier about how to address bias. This is why I said I believe in responsible AI. AI could just be deployed wholesale without any responsibility, but there will be a lot of negative impacts as well to balance the positive benefits. So I do think that responsible AI means asking that question, looking at it, looking at the data, looking at human behavior on a platform like X or the other social platforms, and saying, if that was the only representation of human data that there was, is it really representative? It's representative for some aspects of human data, sure, but is it truly representative of the whole of humanity? I would hope not. So the point is about that's why bias can creep into these pieces. But look, I do think, as to are we ready? We're always moving forward, in terms of adopting technology since the Industrial Revolution. I mean, since the early days, since caveman, we're always looking at the world and the tools around us and looking at how we adopt it. So we're always not quite ready, and yet we're going to move ahead anyway. But I do think, just to kind of help bring together some of those points, I do think in the sector we're talking about, the future of media, it does belong to those who use technology, especially AI, not only for efficiency or scale, but to unlock this incredible human potential, human potential in marketing. And that includes creativity and empathy and intuition and relationship building. It's not to replace those, it's to help us unlock it even more. Think about all those incredibly talented people with latent talent, but don't have the opportunity to share that with the world, to tell their stories, to tell their narrative, to excite people. If we can use technology and AI to unlock those elements, the human elements, then we can, we can realize the benefits. Humans also include some of those negative aspects too. That's part of being human. But I think if we can address the bias so that doesn't dominate, it shouldn't be dominated by that piece. I'm a bit bigger believer in humanity than that. And certainly my time spent in India, I think there's incredible humanity in India. So it doesn't all have to be, the biases, the search situations on Grok. There's a lot more positive pieces in there too. So I think readiness, we'll figure this out, but as long as we try to be responsible and we try to, amplify and augment that human intelligence.